If you're designing an interface, especially for a mobile app or a desktop app, you will inevitably be asked to design the app icon also. Now, sometimes there are specific teams that handle branding that will handle more of the app icon work, and because it really is an extension of the brand, but it is also a visual representation of the work that you are doing for the interface. So it's pretty tightly tied together. And if I ever have the opportunity to design the app icon, I totally go for it, because a lot of what I'm putting into the app and the load screens and the app icon, it just all works together. App icon design in general, it could be an entire separate course. So I don't want to go too detailed on shapes and styles and iconography and glows and all of that, because that would just simply be a little bit out of scope for an interface design course. But I do want to give you some practical tips to just design your own app icons inside of your design tool, a way that you can kind of test it and see it in different contexts. So let's just dive in and take a look at some projects. This is the Steady iPhone app that I designed. Started as a web app, ended up being an iPhone app. And it was basically a way to consolidate all of the kind of gig economy workers' tasks. So like if you're doing TaskRabbit, driving an Uber, driving a Lyft, it was like a way that you could keep track of everything and have a steady income, even though you were doing all these different gig economy type things. So I was only hired to design the UI and to work through the UX of the app. And they were seeking other places to get the branding done, but I felt very strongly about the branding, and so I just started designing it anyway. And eventually they accepted the work that I did, because I just felt so strongly that it needed to have a very simple but strong kind of mark. So this is the mark that I came up with, and it was actually just, I bought this typeface called I believe it was Trim or Micro from Letters from Sweden. Really good type foundry. And they have this typeface, and it's got these cuts, these vertical cuts on the letter forms. And it just felt like a very strong, kind of rigid metaphor for the steady concept. So I carried that typeface style forward into the kind of branding mark. So using the S, I used a circle to kind of start off with, and then I just cut the edges off the same way that the typeface had their edges cut off. And so it kind of created this shield look. This shield with the S, it just felt kind of like safe and strong and secure. And with those rigid edges, it kind of feels steady. And so I wanted to see what it looked like kind of in the App Store. So I just took a screenshot of the App Store and just placed this thing right in place. I thought it would be really cool to show a white background icon with the purple. And this was just an easy way to just scale it down. These icons in this particular context were roughly 62 by 62. So just taking the existing mark and using kind of iOS has a very strong kind of template language, and they give you a grid to work with. If you simply search for app icon, iOS, Apple, something along those lines, the first search result is going to be developer.apple.com, and you'll have access to all of their image sizes and different things. They recommend 180 by 180 for iPhone. So this would be 60 points at 3x. And there's just tons and tons of sizes, and these are always changing. So I don't want to go too deep into these sizes, but the same way with iOS, your desktop apps for the Mac, they're going to have different sizes, and those are listed on the Apple developer website just the same. So this is the My Monero desktop app icon for the Mac. And the desktop icon guidelines are very specific. You'll see a lot of these have, well, maybe not a lot of these, but some of them, like this IA Writer and the ScreenFlow here and the Final Cut Pro, you can tell that they're all slightly just turned a little bit. And that's because in the guidelines for the desktop app on the Mac, it tells you that the icons are tilted at -9 degrees. So if you look at this one, it's not something that you have to absolutely do, because a lot of these you can tell are just straight up doing their own thing. But the Notes, Final Cut Pro, a lot of these are adhering to that -9 degrees. So if you just search for the guidelines for those app icons, you'll get a lot of little tidbits on those. And just like I showed on the iOS, all of the different sizes that are required for the App Store, the iPad Pro, they're all slightly different. So you need slightly different versions of those icons. So that's why I've got the App Store version right here. I've got the 512 version, 256, all of those icons that are needed for different sizes. I'm taking the existing thing that I designed for part of the UI, like these colored wallets that indicate kind of which wallet that you're looking at. I already had these really interesting little digital cryptocurrency wallets. So I just took that same exact concept for that and created kind of a darker, more of an app icon with the My Monero branding. And you can tell I added like a little bit of noise on top of that. So inside of Sketch, I selected this MM. You can see I've got another fill on top of here. And I just selected one of these little noise patterns, put it at 5% opacity just to give it a little bit of texture. But I wanted it to be nice and clean and cohesive, and I wanted it to match a lot of the internal UI components so it had a very consistent feel. And you can take that as a big symbol and then rotate the symbol and scale it down so you can have all these different options. The only catch is if you get really small, you might have to go in and manually tweak some of those details on the much smaller icons. It kind of depends on the nature of your icon. Sometimes you can get away with just scaling it only. Other times you have to dig in there and kind of tweak the smaller sizes and go from there. And if you remember the Cinesampler app, here's a bunch of different versions that I started playing with. Remember on our simple illustrations lesson, we're talking about shadows and highlights and drop shadows, rounded rectangles with linear gradients. That's all I'm doing here to create what I thought would be like a cool little MIDI board that kind of represents the timeline of a MIDI player. This ended up being a little bit too detailed. The actual logo was more of like this loading kind of icon with a notch taken out so it looked like a C for Cinesampler. I even tried one with the piano. I tried one that was a mix. But ultimately we settled on this very simple version that was just a circle with the Cinesampler logo. And we ended up using something like this. And it's really just a groove cutout with kind of the inner shadow. And then I'm dropping a shadow on the purple using a linear gradient. But again, this one's at the big 1024 by 1024. A lot of times it's better to start at that big size and then scale down. But sometimes you don't always know exactly if you're needing to produce a big icon, or if you're just kind of producing some concepts. It's totally fine to take a screenshot of your home screen, whether it's an iPhone or an Android, and play around with some different ideas. And again, a lot of times I do this last because now I know what all of my interface pieces look like. I know what the iconography is like. I know what the colors are like. So now at the very end, I will oftentimes start to produce the app icons at the very end of the project. So this was for the SmartLine iPhone app, and they have a very strong brand team that would probably handle this, but I wanted to produce some nice icons as an alternative to what they currently had. So here's how I handled it. I took all these screenshots of the App Store and the app on my home screen, and then I also had a friend screenshot Android stuff for me. Oh, actually I may have just pulled this off of Google. I can't remember. This is my main icon. You can see if I move this around, all of the others are getting moved. So this is where I designed it. And this was largely based off of some of the icons that I used inside of the actual interface. I wanted to see what they look like in context. So if I hide these and I hide this section right here, these are just rectangles that I've drawn over the top of the app. So the app screenshots, just because I wanted to hide all of the existing stuff. So I just drew rectangles over that stuff so I could put my designs in place. So this is what the current icon was, and I can just kind of move this over. So I wanted to keep the same spirit, but there's not much worse, in my opinion, than embedding a long name inside of an app icon, because you can put the name in text below. So I like to keep an app icon an actual icon, and you can look at any of the any of the Apple icons, they're all big imagery, especially like the native ones. You've got the heart, the App Store, the notebook, the clock is maybe the exception. They could probably even do away with the numbers, but it's not like they're not trying to say a big name of the thing. The calendar and the clock are small exceptions, but overall, like weather, it's like a circle. You could imagine creating this cloud with a few more circles. Just really, really simple. So I wanted to keep that simplicity. I'm a big fan of simplicity in app icons, and we had already settled on this color, and I just wanted to I wanted to make these a little bit more geometric. So I've got this circle that is kind of centered visually inside of this simplified little speech bubble. And we were updating colors. And I also wanted to show what it would look like with the new app designs in place. So just kind of taking screenshots and putting them in is a great way to show what this could look like. Export this entire frame as a possible App Store screen just to kind of get your concept across. And then the same thing for Android. A lot of these apps are rounded circles. So I just took the exact same master component here, got it right there, and I just scaled it down, rounded all of those corners the same way I did for just the 12 pixel. So it's just an easy way to create at the end of a project to kind of get your point across. You can put it right on top of the screenshots, or you can design it big if you're getting ready for production. But these are just a few little tips and tricks that I wanted to share with you for your app icons. Like I said, there's a lot more that could go into this for a bigger, more drawn out, in-depth look at what makes a really good app icon. But if you want, for your homework for this, you could attempt to pick any of the projects that you've designed for homework so far, especially if it's a mobile app, and then you could try to create a simple little app icon for it. And you could use any of this as reference. Like I said, one of the best things to do is take a screenshot of the home screen and design right on top of it. Make sure your colors are nice. Look up the Apple developer sizes and just kind of familiarize yourself with what needs to happen when you are to produce these types of icons. So like I said, take any old work that you've done and just create a simple little icon for it. Maybe you create 3 or 4 or 5, but either way, it's up to you, and I'll be excited to see what you come up with.